Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, my name is Tamra, and I am a wife, a mother, an author, and a speaker. So today I'm actually starting something that I have been thinking about and wanting to talk about for quite some time, taking care of our aging parents. Sometimes we are very excited to be empty nesters, and then we realize that instead of taking care of our children, our parents need us, or perhaps one of our parents is in need. So that is something that I'm going to be several different videos. I'll be talking about it, not every week, but certainly dropping in some videos that are much needed because things change all the time. And I know myself, after having cared for my own parents, that I learned a lot, and I wished that there had been someone who was available to me to give me some insights and help me understand some of the things that were happening. So I hope that this will be a helpful series to you. And as I said, I'd like to have a video on this topic probably at least once a month. And if I have enough response, then maybe I'll have to start a different channel for this alone. But for now, we're going to begin and address some of the things that come up right away. One of the first things that I did is that I went out and I got a little calendar, notebook style calendar, day timer, if you will. Not something big, but something that I could jot down notes to myself. But I went back to those notes many times to refresh my own memory of how long something had been going on, to tell a doctor 2 years down the road when I first observed certain things that had to do with memory, things that had to do with falling and accidents and things that were said that 2 years later, no one was able to remember, with or without dementia. And so it was the most valuable thing that I did for myself and for my parents, is that I recorded everything, whether it was something very obvious or my own thoughts about something that was happening that didn't seem right, maybe something that one of the neighbors said to me. So it was very valuable. For the past 5-6 years, it was of value. And I really wish that I had started doing it sooner, because as I look back, there were things that happened even before I started documenting that I look back and say, oh, my mom was showing the signs of dementia back then. And just because I've never talked about it before, so that you know, father was diagnosed with Parkinson's. It turns out he did not have Parkinson's. He had PSP, and it's on the spectrum of movement disorders, and quite often is misdiagnosed as Parkinson's. So in the midst of my father's illness, we were dealing with my mom, and at the time, we thought it was just stress. And as it turns out, it was Alzheimer's. So I had two things going on at once with my parents. And so let me tell you, having the notebook, and actually I started off with a very small little pocket size, purse size, tiny, and I realized that I had a lot more that I needed to document. So I went to a little bit bigger where I could write doctors' names, people that I had talked to about different situations. So valuable. It's not going to cost you much money to get this, but well worth it for a long time. Okay, the second thing that you are going to want to get for yourself, going to start having a lot of paperwork, and it might be from an assisted living place that you visit. It might be that you see a doctor. It might be that your loved one has a fall, and so you're going to have paperwork. Do not rely on your parent to hang on to these documents. Even if you have to make a photocopy of that document and then put it in one of those small portable plastic filing boxes, you're going to need to be able to take it with you. And so a small, not so tiny that you can't put anything in it, but small enough, the filing needs to have several pockets, and that you can put it in your car with you. I would not rely on a filing cabinet at home. I would make sure I had something that was portable I could keep in my car or take with me when I went to see my parents. So something else that I did, in addition to having the file cabinet full of documentation, I was able to put together several PDF forms of important documents that were needed over and over again, and I put it on a thumb drive. And so I kept that thumb drive with me so that when I would show up at a meeting, and it might have been for the nursing home, it might be at the hospital when something happened, I had my mom's health information, I had certain directives, I had legal documents, I had a lot of that on that thumb drive. Now I also had it out in my vehicle, but at least I had the thumb drive with me, and I didn't come walking in every time to every meeting with a big filing cabinet. I had the thumb drive ready. I didn't want to be put on hold, nothing happening until they got the document, and maybe they would get it in the mail or it would get lost in email. I was ready. And again, the more ready you are and the more prepared you are, the smoother things will go for you. Okay, so something you are going to want to think about, it's a very difficult thing to have to start thinking about, but for you to think about it before you have any conversations with your parent, with your loved one, and that is of a caregiver. Now, what a caregiver does can be many things, and in my case, for my mom and dad, it was someone who would just pop in and check on them. And in our situation, it turned out to be a family friend who I paid. But this family friend knew my parents for 15, 20 years. She was my age, but she was a friend of theirs. She lived near them. And so they were much more accepting of that type situation. And in the beginning, it was really just designed for her to pop in and see how my dad was doing, but at the same time, make some observations about my mom and report back to me since I lived an hour away from my parents. It was very casual. It wasn't anything that my parents felt like they needed a caregiver because there's going to be a lot of ego involved. So I would encourage you to start thinking about creative ways that you could put some eyes in the house. And speaking of that, I kind of wish that I had set up a nanny cam long before it got really bad. There are ways for you to have eyes in the home, and I'm not suggesting that you invade their privacy, but there comes a point when you will have to. Start thinking about ways that you could implement some caregiving in a very light, non-threatening ways to them. And that conversation is going to be difficult, but it is going to be a much needed conversation. Now, something else that we started talking about and thinking about early on as a family was assisted living. And there are many stages of assisted living. Your loved ones could move into a very minimal assistance, and I will be honest with you, it is rather expensive. So I just want to share with you what happened when we went to an assisted living. Now, I had been to several assisted living properties long before I took my parents. When you first walk in, it's designed to make you feel impressed with what you're seeing. That's not where the care is given. And so you really want to be looking at other things, which I'm going to go into at a further date. I'm going to explain and really dive deep into what you're looking for when you go to visit an assisted living or a nursing facility and what's the difference between those two. But let me continue on. When we went to visit the assisted living, we saw different living suites. And then as we were walking down the hall, the woman who was giving the tour handed me a piece of paper. And she said, "These are the prices for your dad for assisted living." And I said, no, they won't be separated. They were married when they were 16 and 17 years old. So, we're going on, it's almost 60 years they've been together. There's no way we're going to separate them. She says, I understand that, but your father requires assisted living. Your mother will need to be in a memory care. And I said, really? Because I had suspected something like that, but I hadn't said anything to anyone. And she said, oh, yes, it's very clear to me. And I was really surprised when she said that. We had had a couple of issues whenever we first got there, and she was asking some questions and filling out her questionnaire about how long my dad had been ill. And I said, it's been going on 2 years. And my mom looked at me shocked and said, it has not. It's maybe been a month. And remember, I had all my documentation as to what had been happening with my dad's health. And the woman who was giving the tour shot a look at me, but she didn't say anything. And several other things happened along those lines. So that by the time she got me alone and she gave me the prices, she said, I want you to see the price sheet for what your mother and memory care is going to cost. And I said, why is that? And she said, because with memory care, they will wander. Eventually, it's not going to get any better. And so she needs to be in a facility where they are trained to deal with people with Alzheimer's and different types of dementia, as well as lockdown, so that they don't wander and they're out on Main Street looking for, their cat that died 15 years before, which, by the way, that actually happened. So I was a little shocked, but she actually deals with this all the time. And so she knew what to look for. And so needless to say, my parents did not go into assisted living. And things got worse before they got better. So I am glad that I was aware enough of the situation and what my possibilities and what my options were, because that was not an option for me any longer, or for them. The last thing I'm going to touch on in this video, but it probably is the most important, and it is something that you need to do while your parent is still lucid, they can make good decisions, and they are willing to do something to help assist with their own personal future, and that is a living will. Now, I advocate a trust. My family has a trust. My parents had a trust. And once my dad was diagnosed with his illness, they went back and did a living trust, which was more along the lines of caring for them with a debilitating disease. And at that point, we had not acknowledged officially that my mother had Alzheimer's, and this living trust was set up with them being in their right minds. And as I like to say, once the wheels started to fall off, I actually had legal documentation, which was helping me to do some of the things that I needed to do legally to make sure that my mother was cared for and not taken advantage of. And so I want to encourage you to seek out the living trust, the living health directive, and that is going to be something that you will rely on when it comes down to what would your parent want as far as taking care of them when their health begins to fail. It's extremely important that you put together a document, at the very least, some sort of document that you've put together by asking them so that you know, but really, ideally, something that is a legal document, because when it comes down to it, if there are siblings involved, you don't want to do something that is going to cause a family to fall apart because you made a decision that is not the decision a sibling would have made. And so it is important to do that as soon as you can. And even if you're not having issues with your parents, their health, their mental stability, at this point, it's something that every family should talk about. And that is why my family, my husband and I have already done that, so that my son knows exactly what our wishes are. It is tough. It's really tough. And having that, knowing that you're doing what they wanted and legally you're backed up, is going to make a huge difference, because this whole thing is going to be an emotional roller coaster. It's hard to even talk about. but you're going to be able to do it if you are prepared. And so before the wheels start to fall off, have some things in place. Thank you for joining me this week. It's been a difficult topic to take on, but I felt that it was very necessary, and I hope that you will stay with me. I have other things coming up in future videos that I would like to address, such as frauds and scams. Additionally, there are so many things to understand about dementia and the fact that there are different reasons that dementia may be present. Might be something else is going on, so I'd like to discuss that. And then there are just physical health issues that you're going to want to be aware of and be able to help your loved one. I believe that as we get older and we're in our 50s and 60s, our help is now needed by our parents, and they brought us into the world and cared for us, and so now it's our turn to give back. So I will be discussing those things over the next few months. I'm not going to do a video every week on that. Had to really gear up emotionally to talk about it. Thank you for joining me. If this is something that is of interest to you, please subscribe, share this video, give it a thumbs up so that YouTube knows others might be interested in it too. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week. Take care.